Until they bring the streetcars back. Chapter 16. Home late from the scrimmage, I hurried to get ready, gulping down the supper my mother kept warm in the oven, and almost giving it away that no one was picking me up. On Saturday, Mr. Finley said if I didn't mind going in a truck, I could use his for the next date, and he winked at me. When I hoofed it over behind the store to fetch the Plymouth, I was pretty excited. We usually picked up the boys and then the girls, but I picked up Lola first thing, feeling cocky with my picture in the paper and the guy with the car for a change, or the truck. "Where'd you get the cute truck?" Lola asked. "My boss, Mr. Finley," I said, holding the door for her. "I use it delivering groceries." I hurried around and climbed in beside her. "I like it." She looked over the inside of the truck. "I don't think your mom did." She always worries about what people think. I picked up the other couples and they thought the truck was super. Jerry and Steve brought blankets for the back deck because the truck only had a front seat. I talked Scott into asking Sandy as due payment for services rendered, and with four of them in the back, Scott sat in the front with Sandy on his lap, crushing Lola up against me. God bless Mr. Finley. "You'll have to do some shifting," I told her. "I've never driven one like this." "It's easy. Here." With my hand on top of hers, I showed her how to work the stick shift, and she slipped one of her legs on either side of the stick. When we pulled it into second, it rumpled her pleated skirt halfway up her leg, and I felt kind of embarrassed. But Lola just laughed and jammed the gears together. "Grind me a pound," Steve called from the back. I was having so much fun I started showing off, ripping around corners and flinging my friends in the back into piles like a bunch of kittens. "Faster, faster," Steve shouted. "We're not only going to smell like onions and rutabagas, but we're going to look like 'em," Sandy yelled. I took a zigzagging route and we were laughing and bouncing around and acting crazy, and no one seemed to care that we arrived at the trot in the Finley's Market truck, or that we smelled like roadside vegetable stand. The dance was a roller coaster of happiness and greed-eyed jealousy. Gee, I forgot I was only Lola's phony boyfriend until Tom showed up like a Dracula and snatched her away. And while Tom and Lola were dancing cheek to cheek on the dance floor, I started feeling like he was dancing with my girl. After the dance, I turned her loose on the transmission again, and I was feeling awful good until a sadness hit me, and I realized that these phony dates would soon be over, and that I might never be happier in my whole life than I was right then with Lola beside me in the grocery truck, holding her hand on the stick shift with the aroma of ripe bananas filling the cab. And I promised myself that I would kiss her if it killed me. After eating at the new drive-in in Minnehaha Falls, I tried to come up with the courage to park, and when I couldn't, I drove halfway around the city on the way home. On Lola's front step, her mother had an outside light bright enough to land planes. Lola thanked me, and we laughed about her shifting, and I was scared out of my wits. But I swallowed hard and took her by the shoulders and kissed her, and I almost exploded when she kissed me back. Geez, after she closed the door, I wandered back to the truck and I could taste her lipstick on my mouth and I started to get in the passenger side. I dropped Scott last and then drove slowly down Goodrich past 1869. The house looked scary in the shadows with the black Plymouth moored in front, and I wondered what terrible things Gretchen's father had done to her. I parked the truck behind Finley's Market and hiked for home, and I felt a little guilty that I hadn't told my parents about borrowing the truck because I knew they'd said no. I tried to convince me I tried to convince myself that Lola had enjoyed my kiss, that it wasn't phony, and as I ran my tongue over my lips, I knew that as long as I lived, I'd always have the taste of Lola somewhere in my mind. Thanksgiving morning, we were all decked out in our Sunday best, and we hoofed it over to Shelby Lake Line on our way to Minneapolis and Uncle Rudy's. The day was mild and the sky gray, and the blustery wind made it feel like fall. "Enough is enough. I'm calling the Humane Society tomorrow," my mother said. "It's none of our business," my dad said. "We could get in trouble." "That poor dog kept you awake half the night," she said, as Peggy and I followed close at their heels. "McCluskey could know someone in the company. If he found out who reported him, I could lose my job." "Well, someone has to do something," my mother said. "It's a crime. Let someone else do it, my dad said. What if everyone said that? Peggy said, having the guts to say what I was thinking. I said no. We'll leave well enough alone. I don't want to hear it any more. We crossed Selby and waited for the streetcar, and we all knew that the discussion was over. Right in the middle of turkey dinner, like he had for the past 4 years, Uncle Rudy started talking about his boy Neil, my cousin, who was too short to get into the Navy, so he made a harness and hung himself by the shoulders for hours every day until he was tall enough to get in, and then a Jap kamikaze dove into his destroyer and blew him to smithereens. Uncle Rudy got all choked up, and the sadness spilled over on everyone, and we all stopped talking and laughing and having fun. My mother always said Neil tempted fate, and he should have left things alone and stayed short. Riding the streetcar home, I wondered if I was tempting fate by trying to help Gretchen, and if I should just leave things alone. On Saturday, I pushed myself through the deliveries, hoping to catch Gretchen on her lunch break. When I pulled in the alley, she stood leaning against the brick wall, waiting. I backed in and opened the rear door. But when I turned and smiled at her, our car pulled in beside the truck. Gretchen's face warned me, and I climbed into the back like I was unloading groceries. Her father marched from the black Plymouth and stood face to face with her. I couldn't hear his words from inside the truck, but Letterman talked like an officer giving commands out of a cold, blank face, and Gretchen stared at the ground and didn't say much. And I was really mad, and I got out of the truck. I slammed the back door kind of hard and walked past Letterman to leave, measuring him for size. He was a normal looking guy, but kind of cranky, like he was mad at the world. A little over 6 foot, thin, 175 pounds, with dark sunken eyes and a face that looked like it hadn't cracked a smile this century. When I started the truck and drove out of the alley, it wasn't so much how Letterman looked as what I felt when I was close to him. Danger, like standing on the porch expecting the runner to come creaming out of the door at any second. I gunned the panel truck away and started feeling a little chicken for leaving, but what could I do? I knew that by saying a word, by letting on what I knew Gretchen, that I knew Gretchen or anything about her, I'd get her in terrible trouble. While I finished the day's delivery, I made up my mind. I'd call the police, not giving my name, and ask them to check up on Otto Letterman. But how could they protect Gretchen if they only asked a bunch of questions and went away? If they didn't nail her father, he'd know Gretchen had ratted on him and really get it. I felt my stomach tighten. During homeroom on Monday, I made an appointment in the office to see a counselor, third period. What do you want to see a counselor about, Miss Haas? The office secretary asked. It's a personal problem, I said. Third period, I felt like a delinquent going up before the principal when Miss Haas ushered me into a back office that reminded me of a dentist's waiting room. The heebie-jeebies I usually got when I'd be waiting to have my teeth drilled kept telling me to bail out of there. Mr. Rogers, a history teacher, came sweating into the room like he'd come from the tower or something. He shut the door and landed behind the desk. Geez, he was the counselor? The klutzy teacher that had been our B squad basketball coach when I was a sophomore. He had me picking up splinters on the bench while guys who were dribbling off their kneecaps, who weren't even on the A squad now, played the games. If this guy's counseling was anything like his drippy coaching, I didn't have much hope. Hello, Cal. I hear you boys gave Washburn a good going the other day, the counselor said. Yeah, we beat them. Now then, Cal, what seems to be the problem? Can you do anything about a father who beats his kids? The smile slunk off Mr. Rogers' face. Are you having a trouble at home? No, it's not about me. What if I knew a kid who was being beaten, but the kid didn't dare tell anybody? What could you do? Well, I think the student would have to speak up. Tell us about it. Is this one of our students? I squirmed in the chair and tried to be careful. I can't tell, I promise. I was thinking. Mr. Rogers waited. Couldn't you get the police to lock him up? Not just by what you've told me. The student would have to come forward, give evidence, something. They can't go jailing someone just a story. It isn't a story. I've seen the kid's bruises. Oh, that's terrible. Just terrible. If the kid told, would the cops protect them? I said. Well, I don't know. Why don't you tell me who we're talking about and maybe I can help? Are you like a priest? You can never tell anyone? Well, sort of. What we talk about is confidential. If they don't protect the kid, the father will kill her, I said, and then bit my tongue. Oh, now, Cal, that sounds a little preposterous. I find it hard to believe that any parent. Do you think the police would do anything if they knew? I don't know. A parent has the right to discipline his children, but if unusual force and cruelty were being used, they might give a parent a warning and let them know they would keep an eye on him. A warning? I stood up. I gotta go. If you tell me who, thanks, Mr. Rogers. I opened the door and bombed out of there. Any time, Cal, any time, he called after me.